What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. Looking at SPY, you guys could quite clearly see we got this rejection over and over and over again over the last couple of weeks. And we're continuing to see the bears having a bigger edge. So the question now remains what's going to happen, at least moving forward. I personally think that right now the bears are going to likely try to drag us lower. However, we're going to be looking at these lows to see if they hold, not to mention what kind of effect we get from the election. So that's why I want to give you guys a review about the week. I'll start talking about some data first, and I'll break down these charts in more detail a little bit later on. So let's talk about this. So for tomorrow, it's going to be Monday, November 4th, 2024. Do not forget about all the times that are coming out. And then speaking of time, guys, don't forget that if you're in the USA, daylight savings just ended. So you have to turn your clocks back by about 1 hour. So don't forget about that. That's very, very important. If you're not following daylight savings, if you're in a different country, then don't worry about it. But this is just for Americans out there, just in case you guys forget. But moving forward, at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the 3 and 6 month bill auctions coming out. So look for some volatility in the markets tomorrow then. And then Tuesday is going to be November 5th. It's going to be election day. It's going to be wild. So to start things off, we have some services data that's coming out from the ISM. That's going to lead to some volatility. And then after the market closes, we have the presidential election. It's going to be one of the craziest days of the year. We'll find out who the next president of the United States is going to be. And it's going to lead to a very, very big reaction on Wednesday. So don't forget about that. Will it be Harris or Trump? We'll have to find out. But there's going to be a big reaction in the markets on Wednesday. Whoever wins, I don't know what the reaction is going to be, guys. We'll have to wait and see on that. It depends on who wins and how the market interprets it. So we'll see. And then for Thursday, we have the FOMC meeting and then Jerome Powell giving a speech at the press conference. That's going to be coming out for Thursday, followed by Friday, which is when we have our very important Michigan consumer sentiment data. Also, we're going to be looking for a big reaction to FOMC on Wednesday too. So in a nutshell, Tuesday through Friday are going to be absolutely insane days with the election, with the big reactions to the election and FOMC. But Monday is going to be a little bit more quiet as we just have the 3 and 6 month bill auctions coming out. But there might be some anticipation of the election. There is a little bit downwards pressure in the markets because of that. So that's what the market's kind of like reacting this way. When it comes to other pieces of data, we basically have Berkshire Hathaway announcing earnings. They're going to give us more insights tomorrow. They gave us some information already, which I'll talk about, but there's going to be more coming out tomorrow. We have, Palantir announcing earnings after market close. Then for Tuesday, we have very minor ones such as Supermicro, other semiconductors like that, and a lot of health ones that are also announcing earnings. Then we have more retail, ARM, AMC, aftermarket close on Wednesday. On Thursday, we have Moderna, and those are going to be pretty much it for earnings. Nothing too crazy for the week. This is a very quiet week compared to last week when we got big tech. When it comes to big tech, most of the big tech stocks did actually sell off. We had like Meta, we had Microsoft, we had Apple all selling off after earnings, at least to some extent. So we'll see how things go with the rest of these earnings, especially the smaller caps. When it comes to the way things are moving, the fear and greed index is currently at neutral, stuck in the middle. We'll be watching to see how it ends up reacting to the election. We might see some fear building, so the market may dip a little bit in anticipation of the election, and we'll see if the market, shifts depending on what happens and who wins. Fear is making up the majority of sentiment right now. Basically, we have momentum at fear because we're starting to see it slow down a little bit. This is very, very important because fear is building up right now during times of uncertainty, and I do expect this to continue for a little bit longer, so just keep that in mind. The same thing could be said about the put to call option ratio, which is going up. This is going up because we're starting to see a lot more shorts piling into the markets. That is leading to some downside, alongside the VIX, which is breaking out right now, which tends to be more bearish. So that's basically what's going on with the markets for now. I also want to talk about this. That's very, very important. There's some news right over here about how Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos, has sold over $3 billion worth of Amazon shares, which is something that's important. Could this affect Amazon, at least the news coming out? It might affect it to some extent, so just be prepared just in case it leads to more downside pressure. And then there's news that Berkshire Hathaway's cash fortress has topped $300 billion as Buffett is selling more stock, freezing buybacks. That's very important. Could they be anticipating something important? I'm not going to, go over the details about that, but that is what is once again leading to a lot of shifts right now in the way the market's kind of viewing things. So be careful. He has a different view. Looking back at what I see for the markets now, let's just focus on the technical analysis details, what I think is going to likely pan out as time goes on. So for the market right now, there's a bit of a downtrend right over here, especially looking at SPY. We could attempt to rebound kind of like how we did on Friday for a retest of 573 before we continue to start dipping lower. And I do anticipate this imbalance might get filled again. So I think that we're going to be looking at resistance basically right over here around this 572 and then 575 area. Our supports at 570, 568, and all the way down here towards 565. Those are going to be very, very key supports. I think what's going to happen is we could rebound a little bit to 572, maybe a little bit above that, and then we might be looking for a dip lower to get back down to this imbalance towards 568. If that does not hold, so we have this support at the daily 50 EMA. So the yellow line you see is kind of acting as our support right here. This is our 50 EMA. If this fails tomorrow, I think we easily start dipping to these lows towards like 565. So be careful, guys. There might be a small dip coming to either retest that low, if not break it. So look for a little bit of a pop, then a drop as time goes on due to uncertainty involving the election, the GDP numbers, earnings that came out last week. All those factors are kind of like kicking in. So I anticipate that there might be more downside, a little pop and drop like move. Um, could we get a big bounce after the elections? Maybe, but we'll just have to wait and see. If the lows here break, by the way, the 565 area, we're going to be filling the gap to 563, then maybe come all the way down to 560 below that. So there is a risk of more downside. Nonetheless, that's the most likely case. I will turn more bullish, though, if SPY could close above 575. We got to get back above all the way there. We're pretty far from that. So as of right now, we favor downside. SPY has struggled to break resistance, and we favor the downwards pressure. For ES, we're looking at 5750 is our support. If that does not hold, I think we come back down towards 5693 around there where the imbalance is. We have resistance closer to 5800. Look for a little bit of a pop and a dip lower all the way down towards 5690. We also have a gap to fill down here, so we'll just have to see how it goes. For Nvidia, Nvidia is also looking a little bit more weak to me, and the reason for this is because we're trying to hold this key support right over here around this 135 area. We still have this gap down here to fill in more gaps to fill below, so I do anticipate some downside could be coming. Nvidia might attempt to rebound a bit for 136.5 tomorrow morning. Then I anticipate it's going to be shuffling a bit, just like how it did on Friday, before we see a downwards pressure move back down towards 130. So look at 136.5 and then 138 as our resistance areas. We could attempt to push a little bit higher, but then I think that Nvidia is going to be rejecting, continuing to dip down to this imbalance, taking us down to 132.8 or below as the most likely cases. So keep that in mind, guys. There's going to be that risk of downside, and we'll see how things end up going. For Bitcoin, Bitcoin's holding its 20 EMA. It's holding this bouncing, 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 and then trying to bounce off these supports. We might attempt to push for the low 70,000 area, like overall, like right here. And if we make a lower high, so if we don't break this high, we could just make a lower high towards 70,000. Then we could reject and start dipping back down towards the 68,000. So that's going to be the most likely case. If 68,250 fails us and we start dipping lower, we're looking for 68,000 flat, followed by the 66,500 areas, our next support below this. I think that Bitcoin's going to rebound tomorrow morning because we're holding our 20 EMA very nicely, but there is some weakness building on the charts, especially if you consider how much red we saw here. So it's going to be a rebound attempt tomorrow morning, and I don't anticipate that we're going to be breaking where this wick is right here as our resistance. I think we're just going to come a little bit short. We can also draw out like a fib retracement, so you can even draw it out like this for where this might even attempt to go. So we could attempt to get right over here around this 70, just under 70,000. That also aligns with our 0.5 retracement. And at 0.618 is around 71,000. So in that 70,000 to 70,500 area before it starts dipping lower. And then we might be looking for like a rejection after that for a continuation lower. So that's what I'm kind of seeing for Bitcoin for tomorrow. For others out there, such as we're going to double check like Tesla. On Tesla stock, I'm seeing the same thing. So Tesla's building weakness. It was trying to rebound after its earnings. It was trying, and it's been failing. It's been rejecting. So the problem is volume. If you look at the volume, it's really slowing down. Look at the daily volume. It's been dipping. So I think what's going to happen to Tesla is just like the rest of the market. It loves to pop in the morning, then starts dipping. That's the trend on Tesla. Like here, it popped and dropped, popped and dropped, popped and dropped, popped and dropped. Look for a pop It's about 252 to 255, and then it's going to likely start dipping lower with the target all the way down towards 244. That's where I think it's basically going to, especially if we don't hold above 250. If we reclaim 252, it could turn back up. If it comes just short, we could be looking for a rejection, move back down to 244. So keep that level in mind. I think it's a very, very important level nonetheless. For others out there, we also have NQ. NQ is technically a little bit more bearish. We have these big red bars forming. Can we break 20,300 or not? We might come a little bit short before it starts dipping back down to 20,000. And then if that fails us, we're looking for a move back down here towards 19,850, not to mention 19,600. So I think that there's going to be some downside, a little bit of a rebound and a dip back down to 20,000, not to mention 19,800 as the most likely cases. So there might be a little bit of downside at least from there. For the QQQ is getting a little bit more weak as we have a bearish divergence developing. We have resistance at 490 and then supports at 484. I presume we're going to be hitting 484, rebound a little bit, then continue dipping all the way down towards the 478 area, not to mention the gap fill towards 474. So I think that's there's going to be a little rebound and a dip back down to about 484 is the most likely case. For the QQQ, is there's some weakness building right over here, especially after this big red bar rejection. So 484 is likely going to be our target or below. If it fails there, we're looking for an even bigger dip all the way down to even lower levels. So don't forget about that, guys. Make sure you keep that in mind. In terms of Apple, it's going to attempt to rebound just a bit for 224. I think it might come very, very close to that. Before this thing continues to dip, we do have a gap to fill down here on Apple at 216. Look for a rebound tomorrow for the 224s and a dip back down to 222 and a lot of consolidation in that range as the most likely case in my personal opinion. So that's what I'm seeing, at least for us moving forward. Keep that in mind. For the rest of these, we're just going to kind of like do a speed run for the remainder of these tickers. I think that Netflix is going to continue to consolidate, but I could see a dip closer to 740 soon because we are contracting. We're seeing volume slowing down. So look for a lot of shop around the 750 area. It's been going back and forth before it starts dipping to 740. It's got to break past 760 to turn back up, which I don't really think is the most likely case. I favorite a lot of consolidation around the 750 area, then eventually dip back down to 740 as the most likely of cases. For others out there, such as Celsius, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We're rejecting over and over and over again. I think there's going to be a retest of 31.8. We do have earnings this week, so it might attempt to get a little higher towards this resistance at 32.25. But then I think it might be rejecting near 32 to start dipping back down to 430. That's the most likely case that I am presuming. For Palantir, Palantir is looking a little bit more bearish on the daily time frame. We need to hold above 42.17. If it does not hold, we're looking for a dip back down for 41. And if 41 fails us, we're going all the way down towards 40 flat. So I anticipate some downside. We do have earnings coming out very soon, but so far the share price looks a little bit more bearish from a technical standpoint. Unless we get back above 42.5, I favor the downside. So we're favoring a move back down closer to 41, then eventually the 40 area as the most likely cases. So don't forget to keep that in mind, guys. That's what I presume is going to most likely end up happening. For Supermicro, we've been dumping because of the antitrust lawsuits that's been coming out. It looks bearish, even approaching its earnings, guys. I think we could be getting very close to these lows here. I believe we're going to be getting very close to about the 23s. The 23 area is likely coming. This is where we have a consolidation range. So it looks bearish right now. So please be very mindful. This is a very dangerous looking chart. I do anticipate more downside nonetheless. For others out there, we have Rivian. This also has earnings this week, but I think it's still looking kind of bearish. So if you look at this on the daily time frame, we could continue to fall. We could be dipping back down towards the 10 area. If that does not hold, I have a target of about 9.6, but look for more downside nonetheless. For other factors out there, I wanted to call out NEO. NEO is very interesting. So I know many of you guys may not like this stock. It's completely fine. But here's the thing. It has a very nice setup right now. This is like almost a perfect looking head and shoulders. If $5 fails this could start dipping a little bit lower. And this could also be a long-term buying opportunity because I do see a lot of potential growth coming, especially when you look at their sales and their improvements to margins. So yes, long-term is still bullish, but short-term is looking very bearish. We have a head and shoulders and it looks very, very symmetrical, very nice. If you want to play this, guys, it's your choice. If you lose $5, expect a dip, and that could be a very, very good money-making opportunity, right? Trading with just a few thousand doesn't really impact the share price, considering it's still a multi-billion-dollar company. So, it's not really, affecting it too much. So you could still make the money. You still get your slice of the pie if you're interested, but it's your choice. It's up to you guys. I know a lot of people are against shorting, but You could have your own morals, and I respect that. But at the end of the day, there is money to be made, and it is what it is, right? For SoFi, SoFi is 11 is our support. If 11 fails us, we could be dipping back down to this imbalance towards 10.47. We also have 11.5. So we could be dipping back down towards the 10.5 area. So watch to see a little bit more downside just temporarily. For the IWM Russell 2000, I'm seeing the same thing essentially developing. There is weakness on this chart, very similar setup as SPY, as we had a high here, came down, made a lower high, came down. So it could attempt to test 220, maybe come a little bit short of that before it starts dipping back down for 217.5, then eventually back down towards 216. I anticipate some downside is going to be one of the most likely possibilities. For what is this? AMD, after its earnings, this thing dumped. So sadly, it looks more bearish because of the fact that their guidance was not what many investors were looking for. Guidance was a little bit weak, so it still looks like it's going to be coming down to fill this gap. Looks bearish to me. I think that 140 is going to be tested very soon. If that does not hold, we're going to be dipping. I do believe there's going to be some buyers trying to defend 140, so it could attempt to rebound off 140. So look for a test of 140, then a rebound temporarily before it continues to dump all the way down to these lows into like the 135 area. So I still anticipate more downside. For ARM, we look more bearish. We got to try to get back above 144. Otherwise, we're at risk of coming down towards 135. So keep that in mind. For Coinbase, it looks a little bit more bearish. We're kind of rejecting here. We need to reclaim 188. Otherwise, it's going to continue to fall. I think we could try to test 185, but I see a risk of this rejecting and coming down to filling the gap for 176. So for 185, then a rejection to 176, and we'll see how things end up going. For Amazon's rejecting right over here. We pushed very nicely, but just be careful because 200 is a tough resistance for Amazon historically. The last time we hit the 200s, we did reject here, and I don't think we've hit it before. Like I think that's the only time we hit it. So we're near the all-time high area or very close to it. So I'm just trying to say to be careful on Amazon. The 200 area is a very tough resistance. It could attempt to break it because earnings were quite nice, but be careful. I just want to say to be careful. If we get a big rejection off 200, we could start tipping back down to fill this gap, taking us back down to 194. So if we end up losing 197.5, I'm looking for 194 as our next target. But overall, I just want to say 200 is a tough resistance. For Meta, we look a little bit more bearish. We need to reclaim 575. Otherwise, we're at risk of coming down to 559. We might attempt to hit 570 before we start dipping back down for 559 as our potential target. For Microsoft, we look a little bit more bearish. We need to reclaim 411. Otherwise, this is at risk of dipping all the way down towards 402. So look for some downside off this double top. I think 402 is a stronger possibility. For Google, we look a little bit more bearish. We are in a bit of a downtrend. We could attempt to retest 175 before it rejects and starts dipping down to about 168. So I favor a little bit more downside for the time being. Look for 175 to be retested before we see 170, and that's what I'm anticipating for now. For others out there, people are interested in DJT. This is dipping. It might dip a little bit more for 27.63. Looks bearish to me. We also have a gap to fill all the way down here towards 24. So it might continue to dip. However, we'll have to wait for the election. Will the election cause a big run? Will we dump? We'll have to wait and see. The VIX, okay, it's dipping. We do have this gap down here to fill, but nothing is guaranteed. Even if it comes down just a little bit to fill the gap to 20, it's just a small move down because there's also another gap to fill in the 30s, right? So it's going to eventually run. I think this is going to get a big spike soon. We'll have to see when that ends up coming, but just keep that in mind nonetheless. The 10 years going up for now. We'll have to see how the election affects this. The dollar is technically a little bit more bullish, which tends to be bearish for the markets. The dollar is not as impactful as what it was like before. This could be because of some manipulation. So we will see what this leads to after the election. But for now, I believe the market will attempt to rebound in the morning before we see some more downside. There's going to be a risk of a little bit more downside, guys. I don't think we're done quite yet. And I think the real move is not happening right now. The real move is going to be coming on Wednesday, right? Tuesday is when we have the election after the market closes, Tuesday night. So the reaction is going to be on Wednesday. That's when we're going to be looking for the real move that the market's going to make. That's what we're waiting for. It depends on the election. It depends on who wins and what kind of reaction we get. So keep that in mind, guys. With that being said, I appreciate you guys so much for listening. Please have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow morning before the market opens to give you guys another update. Until then, take care and peace out.